In the last episode, I explained in great detail why the elysia envelope is by far the most capable hardware transient shaper out there. In today's episode, I would like to show you some creative techniques using the dual band mode. By deactivating the stereo link option, you have access to the dual band mode. In this mode, the envelope has two separate mono channels which can be controlled individually. One side, for example, can act as a transient shaper, either in the full range mode or in the frequency selective mode, and the other side can act as an EQ, as you can see here. So I then have a two-band equalizer. You can apply this technique to all existing envelopes, because the only thing that will change is the form factor. The sound quality and the functionality remains the same. Of course, you can also use this to have separate sides, so two separate sides of a transient shaper or of an EQ. But today I would like to show you what you can do once you put them into a serial mode and have powerful mono processing available. The routing is also very straightforward. What I do now is I go out of my sound card into channel number 1. Then after the processing is done, I go into channel number 2, and then I send out the process signal with channel number 2 back into my sound card. That's it really. Normally I would do that with a patch bay, but for the sake of this demo, I wanted to make it as clear cut as possible. So again, out of my sound card into channel number 1, after the processing into channel number 2, and then I go back into my sound card. Of course, you can hook up your synthesizer straight or your electric guitar or whatever. I just wanted to show you some different audio demos, so I did it that way. So you have a transient shaper and an EQ together combined, which then allows you to do magnificent things. One of them, of course, is having drums recorded through that setup. I think we can all agree that single drum processing is not out of the ordinary, okay? This is something I think everyone will try out at some point with the envelope. However, there's something else I want to show you, and that is parallel drum processing, often referred to as New York style compression or parallel compression. And the idea is you put all your drums onto one bus and compress that really, really heavily, and then send it back to the overall mix. So you mix it in a little bit underneath so that you have the dynamics of the original drums, but you still add some nice flavor overall. I want to highlight this technique with a track that I've recorded a couple of weeks ago. And here you can listen to my drums and the bass. Grooving pretty nicely. Some elements are floating around. Really, really cool. But I wanted to have more definition and more aggressiveness and also more compactness in the drums and in the bass. So what I did was I created a bus and I sent that bus mono to the envelope. I really shortened the sustain, put the attack on maximum, and then also created a smiley curve with the EQ afterwards. So I got a bump in the low end and also on the treble. And then I used the frequency selective mode on the transient shaper so that I would carve out more the mid-range rather than everything. And this is what it sounds like. You know, Nothing crazy. Let me put it a little bit louder. Yeah, so doesn't sound too good soloed, but once I mix that to the overall mix, you immediately get a sense of glue. You hear that? Let me just mute the track. Crazy, right? So, of course, this is a little bit aggressive, but let me put that back in and just put it to around 20. Instantly, you have that really nice treble and aggressiveness. Normally, I would do this with a compressor, but the envelope is very well suited for this task. And you don't need a stereo signal. You can put it into this like single mono track and then just mix it underneath so that you don't really hear it, but the overall impression that you get is a more tighter and more compressed signal, which is great because actually it's not. It's just like using parallel processing. So that is one of my most favorite things to do with the envelope in parallel processing. Another thing I want to show you is creative stereo processing. Yes, you heard me right. Nowadays, I think we use stereo way too much. And what do I mean by that? If you think about it, stereo actually means that you have two separate signals or two different signals on the left and the right hand speaker. And what I realized is that we just record all our keyboards, for example, analog synths to be exact, stereo. You know, they have a stereo output and record them. But if you actually listen closely to what is happening, there is no stereo effect because you mostly have mono oscillators and mono processing, mono filters, and they send out the same signal twice onto the left and to the right output. So you record, in fact, a mono signal twice. And if there is any stereo information, it's not that much. So when I listen to some of my favorite tracks from the 80s and the 90s, they had stellar stereo imaging. If you listen to Trevor Horn or to some electronic musicians like Basic Channel and all of those guys, they used, in fact, a lot of the synths from the 70s and the 80s, like a Prophet 5 or a Minimoog, and they were in fact mono, but they had this great stereo tone, and I always wondered, how do they do that? Because it's not sounding like micro shifting or anything like that. It was wide, but it wasn't phasey. It didn't have that like chorus effect that you would get. And then I was thinking like, oh, maybe they used a Dimension D or something like that. But actually what I realized in some of the production videos that I've seen is that they just re-recorded the same signal twice and then put it on top of each other and yeah, used it as a stereo signal. So for example, a Prophet 5 is not that complex, but once you layer it on top of each other, because of the analog variances, it becomes a stereo signal. And you can do that technique, of course, with the envelope, even though it's just mono. I have this pad here that I recorded on my virus, and this actually proves my point. So let's listen to that signal from the virus. That is in fact stereo. I recorded that stereo. but there's nothing happening really. I recorded a stereo signal and it wasn't really necessary. So I thought, what if I use the envelope and record the signal over and over again with different processing. So I used for the pad, even though it is a pad, different attack settings and sustain settings and also the EQ. And then I would pan that signal across the stereo field. I went to my original pad, put it into mono with the utility plugin, and then you send it out to the envelope in mono through my sound card and re-recorded that, and that was the final result that I recorded after I put on top 5 different layers. So let me solo that, and this is the final result. You hear that? This is insane. This is so much better than everything that I could come up with alone. Let's do the A/B, okay? Let's do the A/B. This is the stereo signal that I recorded with a virus straight. And this is how it sounded after I put the virus into mono, and then I recorded several iterations of the same signal with the envelope and just laid it on top of each other. Now you tell me why I would need a chorus now, or anything of stereo widening. True, of course, this takes a little bit of time, but I mean, this should be worth the effort, right? It sounds magnificent. And I realized that I had to rethink a lot of my production processes, because after I did all of that, it became even more clear to me that I was recording too much stereo. I don't need stereo all the time. Yes, if you don't need a transient shaping tool for certain occasions, you can just put it into a dual band and have separate EQ settings. This will work fine as well. But what I say is, use it in this configuration, try it out, be creative, and you realize that you don't always need stereo tools in order to make stereo. So I hope you learned a lot from this and that you can use this for your production processes in the future, and that you have a lot of fun with that technique, because I was just blown away by the whole production process and the final result that I did. So let me show you maybe how everything sounds together. Okay, I hope this video was helpful and gave you some inspiration for your music production. If you have any questions about the envelope or any other Elysia product, let us know in the comment section below.